All right, we're entering the history and social studies portion of the curriculum. And just to give you a brief background information on history and social studies and anthropology, um, we the study of history is not anything that's an exact science. The study of history is basically subjective to at this particular time to um, academicians, which means people who study these things, and they try to use
Are you a boy or a girl?
information from studies, bones, um, carcasses of animals, text, books that are found, hieroglyphics, paintings that give insight as to how humans progressed. And the amazing thing about the human experience throughout the generation, there are certain names and people who have echoed throughout the generations. People like Imhotep, who is the father of modern day, father of medicine. Basically, he's one of the first great men in history who was recognized for his medical achievements and recognized for um, being one who promoted um, a higher level of applied medicine. And it's a tribute to Imhotep, who was also not only a medicine man, he was a philosopher and a poet and an engineer as well, which means he was very educated, not educated, but highly educated in some sophisticated, um, he had some sophisticated knowledge uh, at that time. So, and we study him for that. We also study the great Greek and Greek philosophers such as Socrates. I think in this course we do not get into Plato as much, but he's also one of the great philosophers who probably, in most cases, got his knowledge from Egypt, but he was able to translate that into um, Greek language, which was able to travel throughout Europe, which is the reason why we're able to still study his ideas and his philosophies today. Um, most blacks, well, very few educated blacks, which there are some now, were able to go to Egypt and study the pyramids for themselves. So we often rely on interpretations by others who are not African American. And being African American, we have to question and learn for ourselves what these things are all about. This is our challenge. Our challenge is to get a hold of this information and make some sense out of it. Because we cannot rely on other people interpreting history for us when given the past and how we're treated. It would be insane for us to leave our history and our understanding of ourselves and our growth and development to the study of others. We have to study for ourselves. We have to know, not believe, but know. We have to know undoubtedly who we are and where we stand. And the only way we can do this is if we study history. We study the structure of the world and how it changes, how it changed. We need to know the structure of the world. We need to know the layout of the planet. And we do go over that in this section. Also, familiarize ourselves with the coming of America, which started off as a colony of the British who was the mother country at that time, which was basically a strong European nation in England, who sent its people, which some were pilgrims, some were trappers, some were people looking for wealth, over here to this country to basically make a living for themselves here, as well as to get materials for England to make money, and also to pay taxes to England to keep, its finances going on. And for the most part, those early Americans did just that. They came over here, they trapped animals, they looked for things of value, things to trade. They had to pay taxes to the king for living over here. This is the only reason why he gave them protection to be over here in the first place. And in the process, they infringed upon the Indians, moving them further and further back into the interior, while the growth of European way of life just took over. And that's a process known as manifest destiny, which means the European race took it upon itself to manifest its own destiny. America was theirs. And this is what they believed. That was their philosophy, and this is why they did what they did in the way they did, in the manner in which they did it. It was to them the God-given belief that this is our country, and we're going to do what we need to do with it. So it's no wonder that you had slavery, you had outright racism against Indians, against Asians, against Mexicans, because it was a European way of life. And in order for them to manifest and bring this to fruition, they always had to stick together against other people, which therefore was the impetus of racism, or modern day racism as we come to know it, which really has little use in this modern era, even though there's still some who engage in racism. But as we go forth into the future, that type of racism is not even profitable. It's not wise. It's pretty much outdated, meaning that the races have to pretty much, if you want to defend your country, you got to come together as a countrymen. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen that way, but it's intelligent to make it happen that way. And so we study the civil rights movement and how, and some of the people, some of the events that brought this thing about, such as the Emancipation Proclamation, which in 1865 Abraham Lincoln issued a decree to free slaves from all bondage. And why did he do that? Basically to weaken the South. Because if he had a love for blacks, he could have done that when he became president. So it's not necessarily about for the love of blacks. It was an economic move, and as well as I'm sure he had some love for the African American community, that he felt like they do not need to be slaves anymore. And there were several others who had that sentiment. But it didn't mean that they wanted African Americans to take over this country, that they wanted to work for African Americans, that they didn't want to live with African Americans. It didn't mean that. It just means that, they shouldn't be slaves anymore. So this is why we study history. We study history to gain a perspective and understanding of those things, so that we can understand and better define who we are and where we come from and what's our future. Because if you in order for you to map your future, you have to have some type of understanding of the past. You have to have an understanding of the world in which we live in. And this is what social studies, which is to study the social interaction of people, nations, and countries, to study those interactions. History, to study the people who shaped those events, times, and places, and events themselves, wars, events such as the Declaration of Independence, which gave America, which was a declared America is no longer under British rule. We are a free, independent country. That this is a free and independent country. Those events helped shape the country and this nation that we live in. So enjoy the history portion of this curriculum. Take in the events. Get an understanding of why these things are important. Why World War I and World War II. Why it had such a big effect? Because a number of nations twice fought in a sort of like an alliance way. They had alliances with each other to fight and for economic and world domination. What you think, countries still don't get together and align themselves with one another for their common interests? Yes, they still do. They still do. This is the world we live in. And you have to understand that, because you have to live in this world. You have to learn how to do business in this world. So study your history and learn it well.